It's like, how about you get your own shit together, stop cheating on your wife and hanging out with pedophiles before you start telling the world what they should do with their healthcare and how many kids they should have.
These guys are all billionaires, and even though people like to point their finger at the rich for all their problems, we have to realize they're not one group. And actually they have a lot of infighting, and they clash with the government too.
Paul Allen and Bill Gates founded Microsoft on April 4th, 1975, with Gates as CEO, where they developed software and operating systems like MS-DOS, Windows, Excel, Internet Explorer. You know, Microsoft.
Microsoft had risen to dominance in the computing world and was attracting the attention and rivalry of other entities who wanted a piece of their action. In 1998, the government had an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft for monopolistic business practices. There are some misconceptions that this lawsuit had something to do with their rivalry with Apple, which we'll get into, but they are separate conflicts that just happen to be going on at the same time. You don't get as big as Microsoft without making some enemies along the way, and these legal battles were all hitting them simultaneously. The lawsuit had to do with the fact that Internet Explorer was bundled with Windows, and that was hurting their competition unfairly. Mainly Netscape, which was another browser at the time. The claim was that since Windows was an operating system and that Internet Explorer was a browser, they were in different markets, so bundling them together meant that one market was unfairly helping their product in another market, since customers were more likely just to use the free Internet Explorer that was already pre-installed in all Windows computers, rather than going out and getting Netscape, which you had to pay for. And that's pretty much what happened. People stopped using Netscape, and Internet Explorer grew to replace them. Plus, Netscape cited a consent decree they had with Microsoft, saying that Microsoft promised not to use their influence to sway browser preferences. The government was actually looking into Microsoft for a few years at this point, and decided to add this to their arsenal to exert control over Microsoft. Microsoft decided to wrestle with the government and try to keep their independence and power. But when you sleep with the devil, he's on top. Bill Gates was meticulous and precise with his answers, and took a long time to think before answering any questions at his deposition.
Do all of the non-Microsoft browsers that you're aware of compete with Internet Explorer?
In the sense that users select which browser they want to use, yes.
But it was no use. The government wanted to bring them under their control. The court found Microsoft guilty of monopolistic business practices, and Bill Gates was going to have to split up his company, just like they made Standard Oil and AT&T do back in the day. The government likes to keep an eye out for any companies that amass power that can rival theirs. I guess it wasn't enough of a power trip to play referee to a bunch of Balkan countries. They had to police their own people and decide what happens in a so-called free market.
So because of this judgment, Microsoft decided to bend the knee and play ball with the government. In order to appeal the verdict, they needed to succumb to the power of the government, pay a bunch of lobbyists, and move their headquarters to Redmond, Washington, where it still is today. Facebook, by the way, learned from Microsoft's mistakes and decided to be submissive to the government right from the get-go and give them influence in their policy making.
Well, Senator, my position is not that there should be no regulation. I think the internet is increasingly
You embrace regulation?
I think the real question, as the internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or
not. But you as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then yeah.
While Microsoft was battling the government, they were also battling Apple. Microsoft pirated some code from a program Apple was developing that made videos play smoothly on screen. This program was called QuickTime. One weakness Apple had was the lack of software on their machines at the time. And as soon as they developed QuickTime, Microsoft stole the code and used it in their own program. So when Apple got wind of this, they struck back and won the court case. In the settlement, they got a $150 million payment, but more importantly, they got Microsoft Office for Mac for the next 5 years, which helped solve some of their lack of software issues. Note that Microsoft did not give Apple $150 million to prove they weren't a monopoly in their case with Netscape. They were totally unrelated, nor did they give it to them to save them from bankruptcy. This was a huge victory for Apple, but even at the announcement, the crowd seemed to think that Apple was selling out or that Microsoft was taking over.
Next, we have taken a look at browsers out there, and Apple has decided to make Internet Explorer its default browser on the Macintosh.
But who was Steve Jobs, this guy who stood up to big bad Microsoft? Was he a saint? Was he looking out for the little guy? Not really. He was kind of a dick. Don't get me wrong, he was a visionary, but damn, most people who met him said he was a bit abrasive.
Well, I did try to talk to him once at a party, and he was super rude to me.
My camera's not turning on. What? Not turning on. Here. Okay. We'll let an expert see if he can turn it on. And they run to the press, and they tell the press the story about oppression. It gets written up, and they get their 15 minutes of fame, and we don't run to the press and go, this guy's a son of a bitch liar.
Steve was such a nice guy, he even got fired from his own company. Well, kinda. See, in the early days, Wozniak and Jobs started Apple, and Wozniak was more on the technical side, and Steve was more on the business side of the operation. But as the company grew, they needed a CEO, so that Steve's time could be put towards product development. John Sculley was Steve's target for this position, since he had a good track record of turning companies from red to black. But the problem was Sculley was making a lot of money working for Pepsi when Steve convinced him to come to Apple with his famous quote, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Well, maybe he shouldn't have done such a good job convincing him to join Apple, because it was Sculley who ended up booting Steve from his own company. With Sculley taking up the CEO position, Jobs was focusing on product development. He had two projects, the Lisa computer and then later the Mac. Both undersold and underperformed in the marketplace, and Jobs was arguing with people all along the way about different things, including which price point they should be sold at. So John Sculley looked at how badly these products sold and decided to demote Steve to a corner office with no command over any projects, so that he basically couldn't screw anything up. Jobs got mad and asked the board of directors to take a vote on who they thought should run the company. And you guessed it, because he was such a people person, the whole board voted against Steve.
Oblivious to how much he rubbed people the wrong way, he was somehow shocked by this outcome. He stormed out and quit Apple. So he kinda got fired. I mean, going from founder to a step above a janitor would make anybody want to leave.
Well, what happens is, like with John Sculley, John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay, but it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies, like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products.
But Jobs got his revenge. After he left, he headed two different companies, Pixar and Next, both of which were wildly successful, while Apple was tumbling fast with their product lines gurgling for air. Apple came back to beg Steve to get them out of hot water, so they had to buy Next for $429 million just to get Steve back. He had won the rivalry with his own company and the lawsuit with Microsoft. Not bad for a hothead. Not bad at all.
Now with new age billionaires, it's not petty squabbles about software. It's a tug-of-war match about how the world should be run.
Elon Musk has been clashing with other tech billionaires for a while. He initially made his millions creating and selling off PayPal, netting around $180 million. With this kind of money, he was supposed to sail off into the sunset and not rock the boat or change anybody's plan on how the world was being shaped. But instead, Elon took his own $180 million and bet every cent of it to create Tesla and SpaceX. This bet paid off. Tesla catapulted electric cars to a legitimate point, and SpaceX has reached orbit many times, as well as getting regular contracts with NASA, with steady progress of putting a man on Mars, with the eventual goal of terraforming and colonizing the Red Planet. But making waves with his companies brought on opposition from other elites who wanted things to keep going the way they were. Now car companies like GM had to start investing in R&D to develop electric vehicles, And big oil tycoons weren't happy with an alternative to their product on the market. So a coordinated short-selling attack on Tesla began, the biggest in history. For those of you who might not know, a short in stock market terms means a bet against the company. And when the elite class short a stock, they don't do it like you and I would and put in a short order and call it a day. They control the media and use that influence to put out different news pieces to get the general public's opinion about a company to worsen and drop the stock price even faster and encourage the public to short the stock too, so that they can basically make a bunch of money destroying a company they target. When asked if he was part of this, Bill Gates couldn't even keep the glee off his face when sidestepping the question.
So you're not short Tesla stock, just so we're clear.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't talk about my investments, but I think he should be very proud of what he's done.
I don't know, it's weird. I also heard that at one point he had a big short position against Tesla, which was kind of, I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems weird. People I know who know the situation well, I said, are you sure? They said, yeah, he had a big short position against Tesla, which obviously didn't work out too well.
Not to mention, Elon put in a bid to buy Twitter to promote free speech and eliminate censorship on the platform. And the free flow of information makes the elite class sick to their stomachs.
Should there be laws that strike a better balance of free speech versus, conspiracy theories confusing people? Elon thinks he can improve Twitter. Well, I don't know specifically what he'll do, but it is there's an opportunity, and we need innovation in that space.
This is the type of disinformation Gates was talking about. Anything he doesn't like is classified as disinformation, and anything he approves of is considered the truth. Good thing we have these crusty old guys to explain it to us, because we're too dumb to analyze information for ourselves. Bill Gates has never had the best PR with the public and pretends to be baffled when he hears that people don't really like him.
He says he can't see why there's conspiracy theories about him. Like, dude, you hang out with Jeffrey Epstein, you openly talk about depopulating the planet, you take a stance against free speech, you're buying up all the farmland in America for God knows what reason, and you wrote a book planning for another pandemic so you can spread your product, and I don't want to get my video banned, so you know what I mean. You literally have a wanted poster in Switzerland for you along with all the other globalists, and you have no idea why the public is suspicious about you. No idea at all. Oh no, you're just a philanthropist. The same title George Soros has. And he's such an upstanding citizen that deserves a video of his own. It's like, how about you get your own shit together, stop cheating on your wife and hanging out with pedophiles before you start telling the world what they should do with their healthcare and how many kids they should have.
Anyway, Elon responded by surviving the short seller attack, meaning that the people who bet against Tesla lost a lot of money. And to top it all off, he even threw a pregnant man emoji that resembles Bill Gates' current state of aesthetics. Jeff Bezos started his working career at McDonald's, eventually landing a good, stable job with a wife on the East Coast. But with ambitions to minimize regret in his life, he quit the stable job and risked his parents' life savings to start an e-commerce business selling books on the internet, and later expand to other items with obsession on customer service. And Amazon.com was born. Amazon grew alongside the dot-com bubble, making Jeff a millionaire, then a billionaire. The company managed to survive the eventual dot-com burst that most other companies of the era couldn't withstand. A true testament to how solid Amazon really was. Even though their stock price took a hit at the time, Jeff remained a billionaire. Not bad for an ex-McDonald's employee. Not bad at all. Today he trades the title of richest man on the planet back and forth with Elon. But the beef with Elon can actually be seen as kind of productive, as they gain similar interests after getting their wealth. When you can afford all the things you can imagine on planet Earth, you turn your sights to conquering outer space.
Now, while all these billionaires agree that a carbon tax in America will somehow stop countries like India and China from polluting, what they disagree on is what kind of rocket will take them to the moon or Mars, since Stanley Kubrick isn't around to film it for him anymore.
Elon and Jeff met at the beginning of their space aspirations to see if they could work together. But the meeting went sour fast and ended up with them being at odds instead of potentially working together. When talking about this meeting, Elon had this to say. We talked about rocket architectures. It was very clear technically he was barking up the wrong tree, and I tried to give the best advice I could. Some of the engine architectures they were pursuing were the wrong evolutionary path. Then he went on to say, dude, we tried that, and that turned out to be really dumb. So I'm telling you, don't do the dumb things we did. Next, they fought over who was going to get the lease for a NASA launch pad, and NASA determined that SpaceX had more legitimate rockets actually suitable for orbital spaceflight, so they awarded a 20-year contract to SpaceX. Next, Jeff tried to patent drone ships so that nobody else could use them, and Elon had this shot down in court since the technology had been around for decades at that point. It seemed Jeff thought that to make his progress look more substantial, he wanted to stifle the progress of other companies, to which Elon had to say,
"You cannot sue your way to the moon." Okay. You know how good your lawyers are.
Yeah.
Next, Jeff bragged about having a rare reusable rocket. Then Elon pointed out that his company had landed a reusable rocket years prior. Petty? Maybe. Or maybe it's all in good competition. They even congratulate each other on their progress from time to time, with Jeff going on Twitter commending one of Elon's launch attempts. I'm sure two ultra-successful guys know the value of how friendly competition can spur progress, and even though they have different goals in space, with Elon wanting to colonize Mars, and Jeff wanting to go to the moon first and learn more about space, but it makes me wonder how far they would have gotten at this point if that initial meeting had gone differently and they worked together.
This channel makes high-quality documentaries on the famous, infamous, and the interesting. Let me know who or what you want to see a video on in the comments, and I might just put it on the to-do list. Hit a sub on it and never miss a new video.